Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fully Charged Show podcast. What we're doing today, which is just wonderful because it's such a fascinating, massive topic, is we're talking about North America. We're talking about the United States of America, and we're talking about that with Miss Go Electric. Lacey to her friends, but we call her Miss Go Electric. She is an incredible voice for electric vehicle drivers. For the industry. She works in the electric vehicle industry. She works with loads of different car companies. She has her own amazing YouTube channel. It's very easy to find because she's under Miss Go Electric. This is just such fun. This is a genuine joy for me because it was just so easy to talk to someone who knows so much about the American market, what's going on there. We talk about all the topics that you can possibly imagine about North America and Canada and the United States and what's happening there, and with the electric cars there and the charging infrastructure and the Cybertruck and vehicle to house, everything. Really, really good fun. Don't want to say anything else. I just want to remind people who are in the North American area that we will be in Vancouver on the 5th, 6th and 7th of September at the exhibition centre there. It's just amazing, amazing location, and we know we've got cars there. Every time we do a show now, we get cars that we've never managed to get before, and now we are getting them. We've got some really exciting cars on display. They're really exciting cars for test drives, and an amazing load of exhibitions, and obviously amazing talks and wonderful guests and everything. So it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to going. It's going to be great fun. Then after that, we're in Farnborough again for our really big show, the really big one in Farnborough. But that's all. I just want to dive straight in and let's welcome to the Fully Charged Show podcast, Miss Go Electric. Well, thank you, Miss Go Electric. Thank you so much for joining us and for finding time to do this. This is a real thrill for us because I've watched your videos for a long time. I know you were at our show in San Diego.
Yes.
And
thanks for having me.
No, it was great. No, but were you at the one in Austin? Because I don't know whether you went to that one because I wasn't there.
I didn't make it to the Austin one, just the San Diego one. And we really want you to come back. I mean, I have people where I come across them all the time and they're still asking me, when's the next Fully Charged show coming back to San Diego? So we're excited for one to come back.
I mean, the only excuse I have is I have nothing to do with organising the live events, which is a blessing, believe me, for everyone involved, because it would be a disaster if I did do it. So I'm party to the discussions about where we go, but I'm not allowed to make any choices. But this is really good to be able to catch up with you because there's now this kind of quite big change in the way what's happening with electric vehicles in America. It contrasts with what's happening with electric vehicles in Europe and in Asia and everywhere else. Because of a lot of things, as we know. But I wouldn't mind starting with what's happening with Tesla and what your opinion is on that, because I can't tell, because they're incredibly common here. There's literally hundreds of thousands of Tesla Model 3s in particular and Tesla Model Ys everywhere you look. I mean, when I drove here today into London, I would have passed 50 or 60 of them. I mean, not overtaking. I wasn't going that fast. But
it's interesting because I was just having this conversation with my producer Tim. We were driving around, even in the state of Michigan where I live.
Right.
It used to not be as common to see EVs driving around, but the other day when we were out, it was like we saw so many and so many different varieties, which was so exciting because that used to not be the case. But companies like Tesla are starting to really make an impact, and as we saw last year, the Model Y was the best selling across the globe. And I think when we talk about sales for this year, for one, when we look at first quarter figures, everyone is going to have down sales because that's typical in the industry for first quarter. But Tesla actually just released this morning the Q2 results, and they are down a little bit. They said they delivered about 444,000 vehicles this quarter. In comparison to last year, they had sold 466,000 in the same quarter. So they are down a little bit. To me, I am not worried about that because I see the whole business in the United States as a whole is kind of tracking downward at this, or at least remaining somewhat flat at this point, because interest rates over here are very high. So not a lot of people are, and that's affecting everything, not just the car business, but generally speaking, when we look at the business as an overall instead of just the EV market, the whole industry is impacted over here in the U.S. from the high interest rates. Also, another thing that has been going on over the last month is many dealerships in the United States have been impacted by a cyber attack, and the dealer software, which was provided by CDK Global, which affects half of the dealerships in the United States.
Wow.
So they have to go from using this software service to doing a lot of manual transactions, which I can't even imagine how difficult that's got to be in this day and age, because we're also used to using the software and the internet and all this kind of stuff to get things done. But sales will also, once we see figures from the industry as a whole, will be down a little bit, partially because of that, but also because of high interest rates. So to me, I'm not that worried. And also considering that Tesla is more than just a car company, it's great to see that they're staying somewhat close to what they had from the previous year for sales figures is reassuring to me. But their energy business, which was kind of surprising to me, was up 150% from last year as well. So they have a lot more capability to kind of spread out their profitability and their revenue and everything like that across the business. But I think still Tesla hasn't really taken full advantage of the levers that they have to pull in order to create more demand. And we've seen a little bit here and there from price drops and introducing new variants of vehicles that can now qualify for the federal tax credit and things of that nature to kind of get that ramped up. But they still have programs like offering a certain amount of supercharging and bringing the referral program back. So it doesn't seem like it's gotten to a point where there's any kind of desperation quite yet.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And when you actually list the figures, because I think that's the difference between a clickbait headline and the reality. You know, Tesla sales drop, oh my God. And then you go, yeah, they dropped a bit, but they're still huge. I mean, if that, you know, for a new car company to be shifting that many cars in a quarter is mind-boggling. It still is
absolutely
the most extraordinary story, isn't it, as a whole? Mm-hmm. And also, I mean, they're, you know, the ones, I have a Tesla Model 3, and that was built in China and brought here. It was before they opened the factory in Germany. But that now all the ones, the brand new ones are coming from Germany. But the fact that that's happened, you know, I cannot think of another company that has gone from, I went to the Tesla, I guess, factory / showroom, which was tiny in California, in the Valley. I don't know when the Roadster was out, when the Roadster was new, and I drove a Roadster and it was very exciting. It was a little startup that had no hope of, you know, just... It was tiny and delicate, you know, the fact that
even up until Model 3 launched, I mean, people didn't think that they were going to survive, and it's just a shock that they're still making it this far and continuing to grow. So I think it's encouraging, and they're never going to stop innovating, in my opinion. So I have confidence that they're going to continue to succeed as they go. And my apologies. If you hear some banging in the background, right now I'm actually getting my Tesla power sharing installed because we got a Cybertruck recently, and part of the incentive was to have a $2,500 credit to get the power sharing installed. So they're doing that right now. So if you hear that, that's what's going on right now.
Okay, but that is a very appropriate noise for this podcast. We're very happy, however much noise they want to make. So wait a minute.
They had to shut my power off, and so I am actually running on a 1 kilowatt-hour battery bank right now for all of my equipment. So this is actually it's interesting because this is the stuff we're talking about, but I'm actually putting it in use at this very moment.
But can you explain to me, because I think I know exactly what you mean, but just to check. So you've got a Tesla Cybertruck that when you say power sharing, is that a similar thing to vehicle to house? It's
exactly.
You can take power out of the truck, right?
Yeah. So it'll have bidirectional charging. So I'm getting the new universal wall charger installed, which will have that capability to use with the gateway equipment that is attached to the house that goes right into the panel to be able to transfer that energy back and forth. So when there is a power outage, it's a seamless transition so that the truck can power my house. Right. Which I do get power outages every once in a while out here. I live a little bit in a more rural area in Michigan, so. Because
I've got everything the same as that, because I have a Tesla Powerwalls and a gateway, but I don't have a Cybertruck. That's the difference.
I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest. I mean, I'm still trying to decide how I feel about it, but
I'm very
it's a cool feature, I guess. I'm glad it exists. I will say that because it's very, very unique.
And I mean, all the information I've heard about the technology inside it is really impressive. I mean, that is what is extraordinary. It's just, I mean, I think as a sort of European, seeing a vehicle that big,
yes, absolutely,
it's kind of
huge.
It just seems so enormous.
I know how you guys feel about that over there. I personally drive, that's my partner's vehicle, but I personally drive a Rivian R1T, so it's a little bit smaller, but still a big
Still quite a big car, but I
yeah.
love the Rivian. I just think that, I've got a bit of I fell in love with that when I first saw it. The first time I saw one of those was at our show in Austin, when I couldn't stay, I was unwell, I had to fly back to the UK, but anyway, another boring story. But the other ones that I'm intrigued by, because I just had the most amazing conversation with Jim Farley from Ford, and his enthusiasm and his commitment to electric vehicles and his kind of joy about it in a way really impressed me, and he was just so excited about it. And then you kind of and then I heard, oh my God, they're pulling back on their electric vehicle manufacturing. Then I hear, no, they're not. They're doing, I can't tell quite what is going on with Ford, but they're bringing out new electric models in the near future, I believe.
Yes, so actually they just recently announced that they are setting up a a facility in Long Beach, California, where they're going to be able to have an advanced advanced electric vehicle hub, where they can get the talent that is in California who are specializing in the development of EVs and bringing new ideas to the table, to be able to create a small, more affordable EV platform that can appeal more to the masses and get the volume up. I will say I've been, impressed with Ford's commitment to EV so far, as when they first announced their 2 electric vehicles that are on the market right now that are for the mass market, with the Ford Mustang Mach-E and the Lightning. I mean, those are some big nameplates, having the F-150 and the Mustang as EVs. That's a very polarizing thing to do, and they're great vehicles. I will say I wish that there were still more, because I feel like there are many automakers out that are producing more variety of models that are on the marketplace right now. But I do understand that they really want to try to advance the technology more to be able to make sure that they can truly compete. And it's not to say that the vehicles now aren't competitive, but they know that in comparison to some of the others that sell in the U.S. market that are doing very well, Hyundai Group in particular, is they need to kind of step up their game. And they've made small improvements with the recent 2024 model year refresh for the Mustang Mach-E, and also with the flash trim that they've come out with the F-150 Lightning. So they're making those small progressive steps towards developing the current EVs they have. But I'm really excited to see what they do with the new platform that they're going to be coming out with, and even the Project T3 that we've heard about in the recent years, which will be the next generation of their electric pickup truck that they plan to build down in the South. So it's exciting to see the development, but I do understand at the same time that companies like Ford and GM and the legacy automakers, they need to be cautious about how they approach it, because they are highly invested in the internal combustion engine industry.
Yeah.
And Ford makes a ton of money, as we know, as the leader of sales for the F-150, being number one for so long, and relying on that business to continue to bring in money while they spend so much money in trying to develop EVs. So it's definitely not a light switch overnight. And I think they're being cautious about it, but I still would like to see more, as always.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I think that transition, I mean, I've become very aware of that as the years have passed since I've been doing this. I'm sure you've seen the same thing, but it took me a while. I didn't know the automotive industry well when I started making this. I just went in electric cars and went, oh, they're interesting, with no notion of what has gone on behind to make that work. But the transition to change, I've had incredible conversations, I'm sure you have as well, with people in the automotive industry. I say, I guess you've got to change like hundreds of jobs of people who make combustion engines to doing other things. And there was one guy from Volkswagen, he said, it's not hundreds, Robert, it's hundreds of thousands around the world whose job is to build engines. I mean, we've been doing it for, over 100 years. It's not surprising. But that
and
painful
all the suppliers
transition
that are
is
affected.
huge. Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's what I think one of the other stories, I know you've covered this as well, and I've been talking about it recently, the deal between Rivian and VW is fascinating because of that. You sort of think, well, VW aren't going to want to know anything from some little startup in America about electric cars. They'll know everything. They're brilliant engineers. They've been building cars for 70, 80 years. They do. They clearly do want some help from Rivian. It's extraordinary.
Absolutely. I more recently launched a weekly EV news series that's about a 10 to 15 minute format, so it's quick and hopefully concise for people. But I talked about this on this past week's version of the current of the episode, which it talks about the Rivian and Volkswagen deal. And I think a lot of people don't understand that Volkswagen actually has invested in an electric startup before in Rimac, and so that was via their sub-brand Porsche. But they have been interested in getting into and developing EVs in a lot of different realms. And in this case, I think it's going to be very helpful for Volkswagen because the underpinnings of what Rivian has developed is going to be a good foundation for them to churn out all different types of sub-brands. And Rivian's going to benefit because of the volume that Volkswagen has. They're the second largest automaker in the world behind Toyota. So that kind of volume is crucial for Rivian, and having a cash infusion of $1 billion immediately is going to help them to get to their mass market goals of the R2 being a more affordable EV for more people to buy at about $45,000. Right. So I think it's a win-win for both of them. It is still unknown as far as those details with the joint venture between the two on how that revenue is going to be shared or what it's going to look like, because it's not definitive yet. So I'm still somewhat hesitant just because I know that Rivian has made deals similar to this before with both Ford investing back in 2019 and then pulling out because they were going to do a joint venture and develop a Lincoln electric vehicle, but that ended up falling through, and Ford ended up selling their stake all the way down to just about 1% of their shares of Rivian. And then they also had a deal with Mercedes with their van division in Europe to be able to deploy the commercial vans, which would have been a pretty decent partnership, but that got shut down 3 months after the fact that they made the announcement. So there's a little bit of me that's like, I think it's going to go through, and that's a big deal, but we still have to see how it all plays out with the definitive agreements coming before the end of the year.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really admiring your memory because I did know both those stories of those two relationships that had happened with Rivian. I'd completely forgotten about that.
Well, and that's crazy because there's so much happening in the EV business. It is hard to keep track of. There's so much going on, and how everyone works together is it's a constant give, a push and pull because. A lot of people don't even know about the Volkswagen with the Rimac deal. So that's a pretty significant one that they have been developing for a long time as well. Yeah.
Now, I saw you giving, I'm not sure how it's described because I've done a similar thing with the British Parliament here, where they've asked that I've had to go in front of a committee to talk about electric vehicles and what electric vehicle drivers want and all. This is a few years ago, but I saw you giving a presentation to so was that a congressman? I don't know what setting that was in. Can you? Because that was very interesting. That was about dealerships. It seemed to be. Yeah, because that is a really interesting area.
Yeah. So for some people that may not know my background, I have been over the last about 15 years working with automakers and their dealership partners on education programs. So I will go into the automaker and I will learn everything about a new product launch, a new vehicle that they have coming out, and I'll learn from all the different departments. And then I'll be the boots on the ground to either educate the consumers, their dealer partners, or sometimes even the employees at the car companies to be able to share that information. So I have a very unique perspective because I go into a lot of dealerships. I've interacted with thousands of dealerships. I've taken hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people for test drives and explained what the advantages and disadvantages, and I focused my attention on EVs pretty much ever since I was part of the BMW i3 program when I worked with BMW back in the day. And that was like my light switch was, oh my God, this is so much fun to drive and incredible technology. Why isn't everybody else jumping on this bandwagon? I'm going to jump on it and I'm going to be a specialist in this because this is so cool. And so in my state of Michigan, we initially first got our first EV, which was a 2016 Tesla Model S. And at the time in my state, it was we were not allowed to have a direct sales format for dealerships. So as a traditional dealership works, there's a third-party franchisee, and they sell the vehicles for the OEM. Whereas a Tesla or a new EV company like a Rivian or a Lucid, they sell directly to the consumer, and usually they plug in online, they purchase the vehicle from there, and then they have a delivery process. And in some cases, like in my state, I wasn't able to take delivery in my state, so I'd have to go into a neighboring state to pick up the vehicle. Or if I ever had to have service, it'd have to get flatbedded or something like that into a different state. And so Tesla had gone all the way to the Supreme Court, and mind you, by the way, in the state of Michigan is where the dealership model started. So, which is also another thing. As you can imagine, the automotive business is huge here, but that's where the model started. And so there are some really long-term laws that they've put in place for franchise dealerships to protect them from the OEMs, and have become very entrenched in their communities in each state. And in my state in particular, Tesla took it all the way to the Supreme Court to get the right to sell directly in the state. So we started to have a couple showrooms here. Now, they couldn't technically talk about selling vehicles in those particular showrooms. People still had to be directed to go online to purchase them. But at least there were service networks to be able to take your vehicle in if you needed service. And a lot of them had mobile delivery vans, so that they are mobile vans to be able to come do service in your driveway if you needed to at the time. But this was a big deal because then it kind of opened the gates for companies like Rivian and Lucid to have direct sale models in the state, but then the lawmakers were trying to close that loophole for everybody else. And so there was an opportunity where it was before I had my Rivian and before we got the Cybertruck, where the state lawmakers were going to put the kibosh and close that loophole. And I was like, you know what, I can speak to this because I have a very unique perspective in working in the automotive business, not only for automakers, but also working with the dealerships. And I don't think anyone else is positioned quite like I am with the passion of EVs to be able to speak on this. So I spoke in front of my state legislature to be able to tell them that consumer choice should be the ultimate win here. And we shouldn't be forced to buy through a franchise dealership if we don't want to. We should have the choice between that and the direct sales. Some people are going to choose the dealership model because they like their dealership, or there are more locations. But for people that want to buy a vehicle through the direct sales means, they shouldn't be shut out either. So the more options available, the better for the consumer. And that's ultimately what I stand for.
No, that was, you argued your point very well, and it was a really, and because that's an intriguing, those models don't exist in the UK. We don't, we have dealerships here, but they don't have that. They haven't quite got the political leverage that they do in Michigan. But then one of a similar experience I've had is, and I've done this numerous times with different, mainly French and German companies, is doing a talk at a dealership conference. So they'll get all the dealers in one place and they'll present the new models and they'll talk about this and that, various aspects. And those are independent companies, that they're dealerships, they're a third party in effect. But then they got me to talk about, this is a few years ago, to talk about electric vehicles and how people are. And it was such an education for me. I have done an enormous amount of public speaking, and I've never had two people fast asleep in the front row for the entire talk, even though I was making fun of them and telling everyone to shout bang. It didn't wake them up. That was a dealership, Renault dealers from a town just outside London. So really a challenge in the early days to get them to even acknowledge that electric cars were viable at all. And the difference... It's
still a challenge, Robert.
It's still a challenge, isn't it?
I'm still working with dealerships day to day, and it's still a challenge.
Because my sister was a good example. My sister was visiting me at my house, and I had a long time ago, the Volkswagen E-Up. So they're tiny little, the VW Up. And there was an electric version of that. It was great. It was just what she wanted, and it's perfect for everything she wanted to do. So she went to a big Volkswagen dealership, and they said, "Oh, you don't want to buy that. They don't work. You want a diesel." And it wasn't that long ago that they did that.
I sometimes, my programs vary, but more recently this past year, I was in dealership with a new EV, and I straight up had some of the general managers and the dealer principals tell me, get that bleep out of here. We don't want anything to do with that.
Wow.
And so it is a very challenging job because they already don't want it, because they don't want to spend the time investing in what they need to know about it to be able to sell it, for one, because that's more work. And for two, I know that this doesn't seem impactful directly to the people that are selling the vehicles from the sales consultant perspective, but from the leadership roles of the dealership, of the dealer principal, and the people that own the dealerships, they don't want EVs a lot of times either, because over 40% of their profits come from the service department. And so from the top part of the company, it trickles down to those people into the sales consultant roles, where they don't feel like it is worth their time to sell these, because they're not going to have money coming back in from the business. So there's that challenge. But the other challenge is that 90 days is the tenure for a sales consultant. In most of 80%, they last 90 days.
Wow.
For dealer sales consultants in the United States. Yes. And that's from NADA, so the National Association of Dealers. And so it is challenging, because even though if you go in and educate the people and you can flip them and see the advantages and benefits of going electric, they don't last very long. So you got to go back in and train even more, because they have new people coming in the door all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it keeps you busy, but it's not quite.
It does.
It's not a perfect solution. But that is extraordinary. I'm amazed at that turnover. That is very
incredible
fast.
Turnover.
I mean, it's got to be similar, I would imagine, to fast food workers, and I don't know, people who move around. I just don't. Why would you start the job if 90 days later you're going to, or what? Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah, but I mean, I think also that model, when you explain that model to people who aren't in the automotive industry, don't know anything about it, have a car because that's, they're not interested, they've got a blue one. That's as much information as they can tell you.
Yeah, and they want to sell even the best, deal and the best commission that they get on. So there's a lot of dealerships in the U.S. where they have many brands under one automotive group. So sometimes even, especially when you get into more of the ultra luxury categories, which I've worked for before, they house, a McLaren, Rolls Royce, and all these other brands under Aston Martin under one roof. And a lot of times there's challenges with those brands because they're incentivized to go a different direction, even though they may have a better product. Some people are just steered towards that because the commission is more beneficial for the sales consultant.
But I think when you explain to people that the reason that a petrol car is much cheaper, one of the reasons that a petrol car is much cheaper to buy new is because they make the money on that car after you've bought it, not when you buy it. Whereas we know from experience, I mean, this is the thing now, when I first had electric vehicles, I didn't know. I'd always had gasoline vehicles all my life, and I knew I spent a lot of money servicing them. When I had an electric one, I thought, it'll go wrong in a minute, something will wear out and I'll have to fix it. Nothing went wrong ever with any of them. My Nissan Leaf is approaching 92,000 miles. My daughter now drives it, and we did put a new battery and all that, but I mean, the car is nothing. We've done nothing to it. Mechanically, it's completely untouched. It's just worked every single time, And that is very different.
That's not necessarily good for business for them.
No, it's terrible. For Nissan, it's a disaster. For Nissan dealerships, it's an absolute disaster. No, so there is a lot of similar. I can see that, because I was wondering if there was a different sort of take in with dealerships in the United States. And I don't think there is. It sounds very familiar. I mean, and I'll probably be told now, there'll be a comment saying, don't you know that in the UK dealership, most people who work in dealerships work for around 90 days, and I'll go, I didn't.
Right, yeah. All the comments. I think that, obviously there are some advantages to the traditional dealership model in the United States, having that there are so many locations scattered throughout every small community, whereas when we talk about these direct sale models for companies like Tesla, Rivian, or Lucid, or any of them that are new EV brands, they have very limited, they have to scale very slowly in that regard because they have so much capital to be able to expend to not only produce the vehicles in itself, but then to have real estate to sell the vehicles and deliver the vehicles and to service the vehicles.
And to service them,
It's a very careful dance that they have to play in that regard, because they don't want to grow too fast. Because they might get themselves in a little trouble.
Yes, which I've certainly heard the occasional complaint about. I've been waiting for a front bit, a panel for my Tesla for 2.5 years, and I still haven't got it. All those. It certainly has happened over here. But now the other big difference. Now, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I've just been to see 2 really extraordinary new Chinese cars from a new Chinese car company that were bonkers. We don't need to talk about them, but we are seeing this huge ramp up of Chinese-built vehicles in the UK. I mean, I drive an MG4 as well, which is just the most extraordinary car. Smaller, lighter. The range is bonkers. It's, considering how much it costs, it's, a genuine real world in the rain on a windy, cold day, 250 miles. This time of year, it's much further than that. And this is a car that costs half a Tesla Model 3, and it's got quirks. The lane keeping assistant is like a kamikaze pilot. It's just insane. It's terrible, and you have to turn it off every time you get in. It's the worst piece of software I've ever known in any car. It is truly appalling. But once you turn it off, it's fantastic. But if you forget to turn it off, it's just hopeless. And you think that technology has gone quite. It's very sophisticated, and it's quite not in the MG4. I will be very public about
funny.
that. And it's not just me. Everyone says the same. But
I believe
it's a really
so.
But I see them everywhere. They're really common here. They've sold incredibly well. They're really popular. I mean, obviously, it's a brand that we know very well in the UK. Obviously, MG has been for generations. But the fact that it's actually a Chinese car. But that's. The tariffs, because when I first heard about the tariffs, I understand that they're protecting their native manufacturing, but then you realise, it's 100% tariff, so it's double the price. So, in America, an MG4, which isn't as good a car as a Tesla, would cost the same as a Tesla, roughly, if not more.
Oh. What's kind of crazy about that is, we've had in the United States, we've had a 25% tariff for a long time.
Yeah.
And back in 2019, I actually was on the team of people who were launching the Polestar 2 in Europe and the United States. So we took a prototype vehicle all around to educate people on it. And at that time, when we went to headquarters in Sweden to learn about the vehicle, when we got to pricing and talking about pricing, we were like, why is it priced so high? And this is going to be a problem for penetration in the United States. And they said, we've baked in the 25% tariff because, we have to pass that on to the consumer, unfortunately, to be able to get this, ramped up and everything like that. And so they had been dealing with the tariffs for a long time in the form of Geely sub-brands, the Chinese companies, Polestar and Volvo with their EVs. But now to go up to an 100% tariff is pretty drastic. And so we've seen already some issues with that, especially with Volvo announcing their delay of the EX30, which was highly anticipated in the United States as an affordable option for an EV at $35,000, which was very exciting. But they're delaying it, and so they're not bringing it until next year because they're going to move their production to their Belgium plant so that they can hopefully try to avoid having to go so far in those tariffs. But I'm not so sure if that is even going to work for them, so we'll see. For me, and my positioning on this whole tariff thing is, I really don't prefer it because I think the consumer ultimately suffers. And as you heard me say before, I love consumer choice, and I think that the consumer should be put first. And in this regard, I know a lot of people in the United States have their feelings about Chinese products and EVs, and they said that they would never buy one. But once you see, as you have experienced, the quality and the impressive nature of these EVs that they're producing out of China, I think a lot of people would be like, I have to buy that. It is such a good deal, and it is a good quality vehicle. And ultimately, that type of a vehicle with a lower price point is going to force everyone to be competitive and get their prices down. Yeah. And I know that some of the, especially American automakers, don't particularly like that because they don't want to have to, spend all this money to try to compete as hard as they possibly can with the Chinese EVs. But the Chinese EVs are so good, and now they're starting to move facilities into Mexico, right over our border, to be able to make their vehicles there. And I'm nervous for the fact that if we do not allow them to come into our market at a more competitive price point, they're going to have global domination in that regard. And as far as electric vehicles go, I know still people in the United States don't think it's a thing and it's not going to happen, but we've continued to see growth. And as we mentioned, number one bestseller on the globe is the Tesla Model Y. People want EVs. People want, and it's past the point of the early adopters who wanted to buy because of environmental reasons. And of course, that is a wonderful benefit. And there are people that are concerned about that. But I think the majority of people are worried about cost and they're worried about range. And so if you can address those two with more competitive EVs, like what China has brought to the table, and still have really amazing quality, that you're having more of an economy segment vehicle look like a luxury vehicle in that regard. It just seems to me that everyone would benefit from it and they would consider going electric because of the cost and the value proposition.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a long-term situation in a way, but in a sense, America's relationship with China, it's in a sense because of President Nixon. We're going back that far, that China opened itself. It was a completely closed off society. We had no idea really what was going on there. And he went there, and that was followed up by Ronald Reagan, who was actively encouraging companies to manufacture in China, because for two reasons. One, they'd save money, but two, they would bring China into the rest of the world. They would sort of open that relationship. And that's what's happened is, I remember seeing BYD cars in the noughties, like 2008, 2009, at the Geneva Motor Show. And you would have been able to spot it. My understanding of vehicle aesthetics and build quality is fairly low, but I could tell these cars were not good. They did not look good. They looked quite difficult, and that looks pretty awkward. I don't want to go in one of those. You go and see any Chinese car now, they are beautifully made. They are made as well as any American or European car. They are really, and their battery technology and software, the stuff I've just seen this morning, is mind-boggling how advanced that is.
China has been investing in new energy vehicles since like
a long
2001.
time. Yeah.
So they've been subsidizing that. And also anytime any car company wanted to come into the Chinese marketplace, they had to have a joint venture with a Chinese company to be able to produce their vehicles there. And they had a limited amount of companies that were coming from the outside into China that were allowed to have that like special license to be able to produce EVs in their country. And so they were very strategic about that, and they wanted to prop up their EV business for a very long time. And it seems like they've
done it.
It's been playing out. It's been working, and so they they knew they couldn't compete in the internal combustion engine division of the automotive business, so they went in this new direction. And the battery technology is just advancing so fast in China and with these Chinese companies. It's so impressive. And even just to see, when we consider different chemistries, the LFP, the lithium ion phosphate batteries, which, back in the day were like, they are not energy dense. They are not, you don't get a lot of range. They don't do well. It's a lot of disadvantages in going that regard. And now we're seeing this technology start to really compete with more of the lithium ion space of the chemistries that are known for having those long range. And it has all the safety properties that we're looking for electric vehicles. So it's really impressive what they've done, and I just really want us to be able to compete on that regard, because if we get that technology advancing, then more people will adopt electric vehicles, and not have to even bat an eye and consider range an issue or battery technology and safety an issue.
Yes. No, I absolutely agree. We really should, when you do a podcast, you should have a row with someone and not agree with them, but I'm just agreeing with everything you're saying. No, you're absolutely spot on. I think you're absolutely right. And it is, it feels like, what was the interesting difference that I've been able to see from this side of the pond is that quite a few of the big European automakers, so Renault, Citroën, BMW, Volkswagen, Mercedes, the bosses or high-level management have all said, we don't want tariffs. We don't want high tariffs on Chinese vehicles. Well, partly because they sell a lot of cars in China.
Exactly. They got big business in China.
Yeah. I remember, well, you will know it as well. I went round the Volvo factory in that's so annoying. I've reached that age where the name
in China?
I had in Sweden.
Okay, yeah. In Gothenburg.
In Gothenburg, yeah. So it went around, this was a few years ago, and they were producing loads of SUVs coming off of the production line, but they had gold trim wheels, and they were in salmon pink with gold trim around the windscreen. And I went, that is the weirdest looking Volvo, because Volvos have always been the most conservative, proper, careful, quiet, don't show off. It's just, and these were like, gold door handles. They were going to China. Now that is 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. That's where, and most of their cars were like that. They were selling a lot of cars. So they do not want massive tariffs on, well, they've got so many relationships now between European and Chinese car makers. Really complicated.
Exactly. And it's interesting, I mean, as far as I understand, it's happening in where you're at as well, where they are trying to figure out what they're going to do because they're coming over in Europe and taking a lot of the market share.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what they've got to do effectively, and I think certain companies are, Dacia, Renault, Citroën, are making smaller, lighter, cheaper electric cars that are looking some really exciting models. We've been covering quite a few of them recently, which is, and one actually, I was thinking of you the other day. I read the comments on an episode, I can't remember what it was, but it was a small European car that was smaller and lighter and cheaper, and there was quite a few people going, I'm in America, I wish we could have this here. That was a common comment.
Even when you just said the MG, like the Cyberster, I'm like, there's so many. But, in the United States, everything is spread out. So for us, we need a little bit longer range. At least most people think they do. I mean, the average commute here in the U.S. is about 30 to 40 miles on a day-to-day basis, so they don't technically need it. And I still recommend to people that if they want to buy an EV, the best experience that you're going to have is if you can get a level 2 home station installed at your house, because then you can just plug it in every single day. Or if you have it at your workplace, that's a great solution. But I think there's still a big misconception as far as especially fast charging stations and where they are at, because they're not as visible as what we expect. And also people have to keep in mind that you have to change your behavior. It's not the same as an internal combustion engine vehicle where you're just driving along and then all of a sudden, every corner I have a gas station so I can just stop and whatever. Yeah. But we are starting to see the implementation of level 2 chargers and slower DC fast chargers across the country to be able to match your dwell time with the activity that you're doing and charge at that time. So if I'm going to the grocery store every week, or if I know for me it's about an hour hike to go to IKEA, they have a charging station there. I'm like, I'll just plug in when I go over there and I charge while I'm at the IKEA shopping, and then on my way back, it's no problem. So there's a lot of activities that we need to kind of match with charging now that we're not used to doing when we have an internal combustion engine vehicle. But it's just that shift. There's a lot of education still that's needed in that regard. Yes,
because I think that's the thing that I try and explain always is, I try when I'm doing a longer journey or I've got a busy day doing errands in a car, what my main ambition is that I never wait to charge a car. And I try and minimize that. And we've all done it. I have waited to charge a car, but way, way less than anyone would imagine, who's never driven one. Because I'll do something else while it's charging. I mean, the best example I saw a few years ago was in Norway at a big multi-story car park, a big car lot. And I said to the people that were showing us around, I said, I could see all these chargers on the spaces. And I said, how many spaces are there in the car park? And there were 720. I've always remembered this. And I said, well, how many have got the chargers? And the guy just looked at me like I was really 720. They all had them. Every single space. You drive in, you plug your car in. And that was near the airport. So when you leave, I know, yes. But that's how it should. It shouldn't be two special little chargers in the corner with green paint on the floor and flowers. No, just make it normal. They've kind of reached that stage now in Norway. But that's
incredible.
But I wanted to ask about that because the last time I drove a distance in the United States in an electric car, it was a Tesla, and I was using superchargers, which were as ubiquitous as they are here, and they're even more ubiquitous now, I'm sure. But I haven't used other charging networks, because that has been up until fairly recently, certainly some grit in the gears in the UK was the reliability of them, and then the accessibility were two. The card, the special card, the special app. Now everywhere that they put in a new charger, a rapid charger, DC charger in the UK, you have to be able to. You just tap your card and pay for it, your bank card. And it's like buying a packet of tea in the shop. It's as easy as that, and that's what it should be like. But it wasn't like that for a long time. I don't know now. I mean, is it getting easier now to use non-superchargers in the USA?
Well, so one big difference between how you guys operate over there and how we operate is that Tesla has what's called the NACS connector, or the North American Charging Standard, what they coined it as the name. And it's a different looking connector in comparison to everybody else that's not on the Tesla network, which is a CCS1 connector, slightly different than what you have as a CCS2 over there. So for us, it was the third-party networks that were supporting, the legacy automakers, or even, some of like the Rivians of the world and the Lucids of the world. Everyone chose CCS1 and didn't go with the Tesla style because although Tesla said that it was an open source type of technology for people to be able to implement, there was still some negotiations that had to happen. And Ford was the first to approach Tesla and make a deal with them to say, we want to use your connector, and we also want to be able to have current vehicles that are on the road that have CCS connectors use your supercharging network with an adapter. And that is a huge shift because Tesla has the biggest network here, and it is known for its reliability. And so everyone, that was one of the benefits of buying a Tesla for the longest time, was that you had the supercharger. You could go anywhere in the country. And from my experience, I've owned an EV since 2016, and even in that vehicle, in the Model S, I had unlimited supercharging, so we would drive everywhere. I've driven across the country even back then, all over the place, and you could do it, and there was no issue. And then when back in like 2021, I was on a television show on NBC Sports where we competed in an EV rally, and we couldn't use Tesla supercharging. And my partner and I, it were 5 different EVs, and we were all on CCS, and we went across the country from New York to Los Angeles. And, we were able to do it, even at that time, with the CCS vehicles to get across the country. Now, it didn't come without problems. There were a couple problems, in particular in the middle of the country, because there's not a lot of charging in the middle of the country available on the third-party CCS networks. And the reliability, especially with a couple of the bigger networks, has been a headache over the years. They are progressively getting better. And I think now they're even forced to get even better now that everyone has made the commitment to adopt NACS as a standard. So Rivian, Volvo, pretty much all the large automakers are going in that direction now and have committed to have the connector installed in their new vehicles that are manufactured starting in about 2025, so just next year, and then having adapters to be able to support the previous vehicles, which is great for the consumer. Especially when we talk about reliability, because we still see that as a hurdle for some people to adopt an EV. And another thing to consider is that our federal government has decided that they wanted to install charging stations across every single state in the whole country, every 50 miles on highway corridors. So there's federal funding that is going to have those stations everywhere, and there are some restrictions and requirements for those stations. And at first it was that they had to have a CCS connector, but some states have now taken internally to say that, no, you need to also have a NACS connector as well to be able to support all vehicles. So we'll see as far as how that is going to shift state to state, because there's still a lot of states that have not confirmed winning bids for those to get installed, and only a few are installed so far. But Tesla is still one of the largest winners of the funding for that National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program. So they will be installing connectors to be able to support all vehicles. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But ultimately, every model that is going to be sold in the United States should be able to support both NACS and CCS. And it's only getting better over time. And even the reliability of some of those networks like Electrify America and EVgo that people have complained about are starting to get better. And you have to actually consider and think about when they first deployed their first stations a long time ago. The first generation and second generation of their equipment that they came out with didn't really meet the technology standards that we see now in these new 800-volt architecture vehicles. So there was a lot of issues with compatibility, but also, like you said, there are ways that you have to pay in the software and the power deployment and keeping them cool so that they can continue to give as much power as possible as the vehicles can take. So it's a complex thing, and so it's growing, but there's some conflict there with the vehicle side and the charging side that we have to keep in mind. Is somewhat of a challenge when we're growing this quick.
Yes, because we didn't have to deal with that here. I mean, we have CHAdeMO from the Nissan Leaf. That we still have those chargers, but then a lot of the chargers that are being installed now just have CCS2. That's all that's become the absolute sort of standard here. But I suppose this is the thing which we started off this particular section is I always want to tell people you will use rapid chargers on a freeway. That's going to happen, but you'll use it once or twice a month at the most, if not even less than that. 90 times. So what you want to be able to do is everywhere you can legally stop and leave a car, you want a charger there. So even if it's on the side, on the street or on a car park, that's where we should be focusing, putting in chargers that are also either automatic, you pay for them automatically through the car, or it's literally the easiest transaction to do. Because it is the few times I've managed to do it here where I've gotten to meet friends at a restaurant and they've got a charger and I've picked the restaurant. I say, no, there is that nicer restaurant up the road, but this one's got a charger. But while you're eating, I'm not waiting. I'm meeting my friends and having something to eat and then getting back in the car, and it's added 60, 70, 80 miles while I've been doing that.
I just this past weekend took my motorcycle safety course to get my endorsement so that I can ride motorcycles and do reviews on electric motorcycles. And at the facility where it was a school, a college, where they hosted the courses, they had charging there. So we actually specifically drove and plugged in while we were taking the course throughout the day. And it was like, wow, I went from 40% to 80% when I left. This is wonderful free energy over here. So and that's the beauty of it, is that a lot of times now it's still either really cheap or it is free in a lot of cases. Yeah.
That is great, because that's the one thing. I mean, I want to wind up pretty soon, but the one thing we haven't mentioned, which I was very impressed. I love the episode you made with Sandy Munro on bikes. It was so sweet to see him on a bike, on his pedal bikes.
It was comical, wasn't it?
He's just such a sport. He is such a great guy. I absolutely love him. But that's really good that you're covering it. I mean, are they? Because what we had here, and I wonder if you had the same thing. There was a good interest in e-bikes, and it was people were buying them. And then COVID and lockdown, the market just exploded. And suddenly, where I live out in the rural area as well, I'd suddenly look out and see people riding on the lane outside me. People my age and older who clearly hadn't ridden a bike for many years going, hi, zooming along. But that market has now dropped again. So it really was a big spike. And it's kind of, I don't know, a similar thing happened there.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's still hundreds of EV companies, e-bike companies, hundreds of e-bike companies who are competing in the market, which is wild to say. But actually now it's starting to get a little tempered just because there were tariffs introduced for e-bikes. So there was a delay in some legislation where there wasn't any kind of tariff on e-bikes for the longest period of time, and it was extended for a while. But just in the mid-June, actually I think it was June 14th, the tariffs kicked in for e-bikes. And so now we're seeing most of the companies that are selling in the United States have adjusted their pricing because it was getting so competitive that everyone was dropping, and it was some of the lowest prices I've ever seen for e-bikes earlier on at the beginning of this year. But now several of them have gone up hundreds of dollars because of the tariffs now that are implemented for e-bikes, and because the batteries are produced or their bikes themselves are assembled in China. Tariffs once again hit the e-bike industry in the United States. So I do e-bike reviews on my channel. I actually just started splitting up some of my channels because I had MCO Electric that was covering cars and e-bikes and all this, and it was some people don't want to see that same content on one channel. So now I have a channel called MCO Electric Ride Reviews, where I publish all my e-bike reviews and talk about all that kind of stuff there. And hopefully soon you'll see some electric motorcycle reviews. Yes, you're very brave. I'm too chicken to do that. But yes. But Jack Scarlett has now he's got his test so he can ride motorbikes. Oh, awesome. Because a few years ago, a long time ago, only in a car park, not on the road, I rode a electric motorbike that had been raced at the Isle of Man. So unbelievably powerful. Wow. And the guy who he said, "Can you ride a bike?" I said, "Well, I can ride a bike." So he said, he said, just don't twist it. Don't do that with the throttle. Let the rubber on the throttle move your skin. That's all you need to do. So he said, literally just like go like that. And I went, and it went so fast. I mean, I hardly touched. I didn't twist the throttle. I just moved it. I mean, that bike will do, I think, about 190 miles an hour. Oh my Lord! Which is just I hope I'm never going that fast. No, don't go that fast. I've done it in a car plenty, but on two wheels. I got to get some more experience under my belt.
Yeah, the Isle of Man race is on, I don't know if you know about it, this is a little island between the UK and Ireland, and they race on a road, on country lanes, right past cottages that are either side of the road like that, and they're doing over 200 miles an hour, some of them. But it's a long route, it's quite a long route, and there's been hundreds of deaths. I mean, it is horrendous.
Oh, I believe it.
The casualty rates are. But now the fastest, it's like Pikes Peak, the fastest machine that's ever done the circuit on the Isle of Man is electric, like Pikes Peak, the fastest car up Pike. You know, what more can you do? We're starting to see it
more and more. Like, all these historic races are now getting records set by EVs. It's so exciting.
Yeah, it is amazing. So tell me, one thing that, tell me either a car or an event or a thing that you're looking forward to. I mean, obviously, I'm looking forward to being in Vancouver, but that's not quite in America. Although, if you go in the right place, you can see America. It's not far.
Yeah. One thing that's coming up that I'm going to be talking about is this upcoming week. There's a very exciting, as we're talking about performance, there's a very exciting development that's going on in NASCAR when it comes to EVs. And so I can't talk too much about it.
No, wow.
But coming very soon, we're going to see something pretty exciting. And I think that not only coming from a performance aspect of, racing and motorsport and things like that, but the fact that it's a demographic that typically is, pushing away this type of technology.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm very interested to see how people react and what is actually going to be available to see in this realm of motorsport.
So
that's something that I'm looking forward to. I'm sorry I can't say more yet,
but
stay tuned because I think it's going to be quite exciting from that perspective.
I mean, it is one of those things that I've been to Formula E races quite a few times around in various cities in Europe, and I mean, it is exciting and it's fast and it's impressive and the technology is amazing, and the fact that the first year they had to swap cars because the batteries couldn't do the whole race and now they don't, they've got masses left. But I then went to see, just briefly, some my brother was involved in motor racing engineering for a long time, and I went to see a motor race, and it was so loud, and I went, oh yeah, that's what motor racing is. I want that noise. I sort of think in a perfect world, in 100 years' time, no one will drive an a petrol car on a road, and all the trucks will be electric, everything, and it's fine, and they'll just be cars. But I still want motor racing to have enormous amounts of noise and smoke and flames, and because it's because that's going to make no difference. Yeah, if a NASCAR race produces some CO2, well, get over it. It's not that much. There's plenty of other ways we can do that. But
it's cool. Because a lot of road cars are now, like, companies are putting sounds in their EVs, like the Ioniq 5N makes the sound and simulate shifting. Then, the new Dodge Banshee that's going to come out is going to be louder than any Dodge vehicle that has been. It's just like, okay. I don't like the noise, but there are people that cannot do without it. So I think it's amazing that they're offering it for those people that really want it.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that car. I'd also want to really make sure you could turn it off, because that's where we drove the Fiat 500, the little Fiat 500, but it was the Abarth one, and it had a noise in it. And when I first had it, I went, oh, this is brilliant. And then after about literally 1 minute, I went, can you work out how to turn it off? So annoying. It's so annoying. Oh, that has been an absolute joy talking to you. There's I'm sure we'll do it again for sure, because you are amazing. Your knowledge and your memory, that's what I envy. Your memory of the historical events that have led us to where we are now. But I'm really hoping that, yes, one day we will get to work together and do something in the States, and I really hope we can see you again. But it's been a real joy talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Okay, that's very nice to know. I'll tell the team that you miss us and see what I can do. All right, thank you. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that. Isn't she just the best? It's such fun talking to Lacey. Sorry, MCO Electric. So I'm trying to use the right name, but she's great and really good value and fascinating, and we'll definitely have her back on the show, and hopefully we'll get to see her in the USA at some point in the future. But first, there was loads of topics we didn't even get around to talking about that we had on our list, but anyway, I think we did fairly well. Can you please, if you get a chance, tell your friends and family and anyone to have a look at the Fully Charged Show podcast, have a listen to the Fully Charged, subscribe to the Fully Charged Show podcast so you don't miss any. Got a lot of really exciting and interesting episodes coming up soon. And also, obviously, the Fully Charged Show and the Everything Electric Show on the old Tubes of You. But that's it. As always, if you have been, thank you for listening and watching.